59 participants, I can do the official hello to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. We have people coming from all over Switzerland, but also from across the world. While you're joining, you should have a poll screen available to you, so please take your time to answer that. And also we welcome hellos and messages where you're coming from on our chat. So it's our second virtual session for Shake Up, and to some of you, maybe you don't know, we were planning to have a session in March, a face-to-face session. Unfortunately, due to the coronavirus, we postponed it. And in the meantime, our community is growing very nicely, so we take that opportunity of having those virtual sessions with you. So thanks a lot for being with us. I am Aleksandra Potrykus. I'm one of the co-founders of Shake Up the Workplace. Shake Up the Workplace has been created with a vision to have a positive impact on future of work. We are starting in Switzerland, but already with so many of you coming from across the world, we're very happy to expand it, and everybody is really welcome. And this community has been formed really to join, to share, to exchange, to ask questions, especially in this unprecedented times. I think we have to come together to not only, maybe, you know, some workplaces are really shaken up now without us, but yeah, to have a positive impact, we are doing this together. And we have two amazing speakers with us today, Captain David Marquet and Heiko Fischer. More about them in a second, but thank you so both for joining. Heiko from Berlin and David from Florida. Thanks so much for being with us. Just a few logistics for the call to make it run smoothly and not to surprise you. We are already recording the call, so if you don't feel comfortable with being on the camera, you can switch it off. But we really welcome seeing everybody, and we'll have an opportunity to also switch off the presentation mode and just see everyone's faces. So please feel free to use your camera. We will be using chat for questions while Heiko and David have their dialogue between each other and share a bit more about network organizations. If you want to pose a question, Isabel, maybe Isabel, you can wave to us. One of the team members will take them, and we'll be watching closely to make sure we get your questions. The agenda is fairly quickly. We plan to finish at the full hour at 3 o'clock, so I'll not spend much more time talking. And the focus will be on listening to both David and Heiko, who are the experts on network organizations, but also involving you with your questions and your own experiences on network organizations. So we have 40 people out of 62 who answered the poll. So just maybe one more second for everybody to answer the question, is self-organization more resilient? And you can, in a crisis, and you can say you strongly agree or disagree with us, or you maybe don't know. So just give 5 more seconds to answer that poll. And that's a warm-up, the first question. There is a second question, so that's a good way to practice polling. Okay, 42 people answered. I will end the poll now and show the results. So hopefully you can see my screen now. We have 25 people agreeing to the statement that self-organization is more resilient in a crisis, 22 strongly agreeing. Nobody strongly disagrees, just 3 disagrees and 8 don't know. So very curious to see, you know, how the discussion evolves and what Heiko and David have to share with us. Maybe there's some more convincing happening at the end of the call. Let's see. And as I said, I have a second poll for you. So now I'll launch the second question. We're curious to know which type of organization you're in. So tell us, are you in a self-organized team, or maybe a self-organized team in a hierarchical company, or a hierarchical, or you just work on your own? results are coming in very quickly. Thank you for answering very nicely and quickly to that. So we have, yeah, 31 people answered. Let's just wait a bit more. "32 people answered, and there is no movement. Why don't I end the poll now and just show you the results?" So we have most respondents in self-organized team, but hierarchical companies, 18 respondents, 16 people working on their own, 11 people in hierarchical organizations, and 10 in self-organized. So a very nice spread of experiences in this group. And again, I think this will be really valuable to have the right discussion and to learn from our speakers. And yeah, talking about our speakers, again, thank you so much to David and Heiko for joining us. I wanted to introduce them a little bit more as I didn't spend much time talking about them. So I'll start with David, Captain Marquet. He's really best known for his work with the nuclear-powered submarine. And it's USS Santa Fe. I'm just checking my notes not to make any mistakes on the names. And he took that submarine and basically took it from the worst to the first, achieving highest retention and operational standings. He also generated the most leaders the Navy has ever seen. So really great success from David. And he's the author of a best-selling book, Turn the Ship Around, a true story of turning followers into leaders. And his recent leadership is language book. So it's incredible honor, David, to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining. And there is a common denominator between the two, Heiko and David. So I'll talk about Heiko now. Heiko
hairstyle. It's the hairstyle. Right?
Absolutely. Spots 3 differences.
This is my coronavirus hair. Haircut.
So speaking about Heiko, he's been voted one of Germany's top 40 entrepreneurs in 2016. He already implemented network teams at scale in a video game organization where he was an HR person. Currently, he's a CEO and founder of Resourceful Humans, and he spearheaded the New Work movement and network organizations in industry leaders like Accenture, T-Mobile. So great experiences from both sides on very different organizations. Really great to welcome you. And the common denominator for both of you is in 2018, you both created a an experience, which is a unique network leadership experience in VR. I hope I did justice to you. I'm sure there's a lot more to say about you, but I'm glad to have you both, and over to you. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, I was actually looking at, you could pretty much write the story. What happened to David, the same happened to me. Like, he decided to not give any more orders on a submarine. I decided to not give any more orders in an HR department. The only real difference is that I got rid of my HR department for self-organization. David didn't get rid of the Santa Fe. He just made it a lot better. So, but yeah, that's cool. Thank you for the intro. It's a pleasure to be here, and I know now our goal is to convert 19%, right? There were 5% who disagreed and 14 who said they don't know. Did I get that right?
Yes.
So maybe, David, how do you want to start it? Should we get the voices of dissent and see who the people are who strongly disagree and start from there, or should we laud ourselves a little more?
No, well, I like hearing about from the dissenters. I think where I would start this, because I'm an engineer, is I would start with the definitions of what does it mean when we say a self-organized team. I'm guessing we all have slightly different pictures of what a self-organized team means. So maybe Heiko, why don't you tell us what you think a self-organized team is?
We actually, yeah, we had to write down a definition for that once, because one of the things, where my dad took me to school was, he said, you always need a shared definition as a thinking tool. For us, self-organizing enterprise is defined by the fact that you don't have to run through a constant approval process, right? The purpose and the priorities of the organization are so clear that people can autonomously work towards that purpose based on these priorities. as long as they transparently share what their intentions are and working towards that goal. So if the other teams and the other individuals in the organization know transparently what I intend to do next, they can veto it, right? And they can say, hey, Heiko, what you think there, that's going to be a stupid move, or that's not in line with our priorities, or that's going to sink the ship, that's going to end the company. That's not a good use of our resources. But there's a bias for action in the sense that I can go ahead as long as I state my intention of what I'm going to do next and work with my team autonomously. I don't have to go through multiple layers of approvals in a hierarchy and say, hey, am I allowed to do that? Can you check with your boss if I'm allowed to do that? How far up does it have to go before we've already lost the customer at this point? But at some point, the approval will come back down. Yeah, you can do that. Well, I don't really need that anymore. So it'll be a bias for action, and in a very tangible way. For example, in a bank, it would be the teller, the guy who's in touch with the customer can make decisions as if she were the CEO, because she knows these are the resources we have available, these are our priorities, and this is what we're going for, so I can make that decision for the customer right here. I don't need to get an approval from somewhere else. Would you agree with that one, David, or?
Yeah, I think that's really good. So I'm channeling you a little bit because I have some high technology graphics with me. And I was guessing you were going to say something about distributed decision making. So the way I think about it is, so first of all, I don't know if a nuclear submarine is a self-organized team. I think in terms of your definition, Heiko, it was pretty close to a self-organized team. But one of the things is, it doesn't mean everyone can do whatever they want. And you can choose, if we're assigned to pick up a special forces team in the middle of the night, the members of my crew could not opt out. They had made a commitment to when their opt-out point was 6 months earlier when they decided to join the team. But once you join the team, they now have an obligation. At the same time, we did as much as possible to push the authority for making decisions down to where the information is. And what I'm drawing here is just the typical hierarchy. And what we see is, we all know that the people at the bottom of the hierarchy or at the periphery have more information. As Heiko was saying, the teller is looking into the face of the customer. They know what's going on. They have the context. They have highly nuanced information. But in traditional hierarchies, we channel that information to people with authority who then make decisions, and it comes back down. And by then, the customer's gone, and it doesn't really matter anymore. And so one of the things we say is push authority to where the information is. And I guess I'm sort of barking up this tree because one of the questions is, lots of good questions, first of all, very thought-provoking, but in times of crisis, we need quick decision-making. Doesn't consensus decision-making slow us down? And for me, what we're saying there is is that self-organized teams equals consensus decision-making. And that's not how I see it.
No.
What I see is in self-organized teams, because the person with the information has the authority to make the decisions are actually faster in a self-organized team because we don't have all this delay, and they're more resilient because if the person with the information says, go left, oh, that's wrong, go right, that adjustment happens very quickly as opposed to go left, okay, that's approved, blah, 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 blah. Oh, no, that's wrong, go right. So And
I think, David, this is really important, that self-organization is not management by committee. It's not management by consensus, right? And I think this was actually the CEO of Morningstar, of the tomato producing company in California. We've been doing this since the 60s, I think. And he said, self-organization is not the lack of structure. It's how structure is established.
Yeah.
That the people who are in charge of the conveyor belt, who are in charge of sorting the tomatoes, of selling them, they decide on the best structure to make it work for them, to get that value to the customer, to get the best out of tomatoes. That shouldn't be somebody else in the background who makes a decision, but he's never been in that job. But once you've made a commitment with your peers on what that structure is, it's a sacred oath. It can't just be willy-nilly be, adapted at all times. And I think the one big difference between the Santa Fe and a self-organizing company or an enterprise is that I would assume anyways that on a submarine, the best specialist is already in place for their given tasks. Where in an enterprise, that's not always the case. It's important to always assign leadership to that person who in that moment is the best person to make the call to action. And that might not always be the leader, right? Because that's why we have this whole agile work movement. It might be that in a video game company, the audio guy is the guy who has to make the call right now, or then it's the programmer, or then it's the art guy. It's not always the captain, right? That's the difference.
Yeah, I think of one of the things that I'm thinking about, there's some examples right now with coronavirus that we're working with teams. And so we worked with a state government, and now, and one of the things that the government, that this office did was they approved building permits. And the way it used to work is people would come in with their plans, and they would get their plans, and they would show up in an office, and someone would look at the plans, and then they read them, and they'd send them out for review. They put a stamp on them and said your building permit's approved. Well, now with coronavirus, they had to very quickly say everybody go work from home. And so the person running this office has got 4 or 5 teams. They're all trying to figure out. One's trying to figure out building permits. One's trying to figure out zoning permissions or restaurant licenses. They're all trying to figure this out. Well, how do I do building permits online? And do I need to send an inspector out there? Or can I just have the person hold up their FaceTime the person with their iPhone? That's way too hard and too fast and too complicated for one person to be making all these decisions. But fortunately, because they've been working with building, the phrase I use is distributed decision making. We push the decision making out, but we still need unity of effort. The teams, each team was able to get together and make decisions. Now they're communicating, say, here's how we're going to handle this, here's how we're going to handle this. And there's a bit of an experimental approach. Hey, we're going to try this. If it doesn't work, we're going to adjust. And it might not be perfect, but we're going to move forward. And so as a result, this organization has actually pivoted now, and they're still approving. There's not a whole lot of economic activity happening, but construction has been still classified as an essential service. Construction, healthcare, running the drugstores and the grocery stores. So it's good because there's not a lot of economic activity happening, but they're able to support what little economic activity is actually happening. Another example for me is the Fukushima reactor plant. And you guys remember
David,
yeah, go ahead.
One thing, I think one thing that's important when we talk about self-organizing environments is that there's certain prerequisites. In the past at RH, we always talked about the triangle of trifecta of want, can, and enable, but David has put this much more succinctly, and he says basically there are 2 pillars that support the system, right? And it's clarity on one side about what to do and what the situation is and what the resources are, so clarity of priority or the purpose of the organization and all of that. But there also needs to be the competency, right? And I think what we're seeing right now in many organizations is the cracks are starting to show. Yeah, people can align, they can Zoom and they can connect, but they have the technology for that. But are they clear on the priorities? Are they clear on where they're going? Is there a leader stepping up, telling them which direction to go in? Do they have the competency to do that in a completely virtual environment?
Yeah, and I think clarity, it's way more complicated than just saying safety first or the customer first or something like that. Because as these organizations are dealing, people have to make decisions. Well, I could let the home inspector hold his camera up and now the inspector doesn't have to go there. The homeowner can just show how the solar panels are connected. But what if somehow you could trick the system. Maybe they only show the ones that they use the 4 bolts and they skip the ones where they have the 3 bolts. So you could theoretically conceive that there's going to be some risk there. So the question is, how much risk do I accept when I try this program? And that's those risk gain calculations that tend to be very nuanced. And this is why I think the transparency that Heiko talked about is really important, because it's with those conversations, self-organizing teams need significantly, like 10 or 100 times as much communication as a hierarchical team. Because in a hierarchical team, it's assumed that the coordination happens at the top. And so there's just linear lines of communication up and down. In a self-organizing team, each node has to talk to each node. So the communication structure is totally different. One of the things we like to look at is we just look at what we measure the communication structure. You can just count words that people say in meetings. Does the boss say more words than everybody else? Or you could look at email count or something like that. And that will map to the structure of the organization. Doesn't matter what they say, because, oh, we're running the Spotify model. But if the boss is saying all the words, it's like, yeah, probably not.
And that's really funny. Ola, sorry, just to pitch in there. For me, it was such an eye-opening experience. So, Ola, you mentioned that we built this VR game, right? And this was really for leaders to experience what's the difference between this sort of command and control environment where it goes through a hierarchy and a self-organizing environment where everybody's asked to act proactively, right? And David had an idea to actually, since you're wearing these VR goggles and you have microphones on, to measure the amount of speaking time. So we have 4 positions: a captain, a navigator, an engineer, and a weapons guy. And we can measure how much each of them speaks. It's called the team language coefficient. And many times we have people coming in playing this VR game, and we try to match the positions on the submarine, on the VR submarine, to their real life positions in the organization. So the CEO or the managing director will go in the captain's chair, then the COO will go into the navigator's chair, and so on, right? And many times the managing director or the leader will come in and defer and go, oh, no, I don't want to sit on the captain's chair. I'll sit at engineering. I'll let somebody else be captain, you know? But then after the game, we will look at the share of their voice, like how much they talk. And you'll see that the captain or the leader who's been sitting at engineering actually dominated the discussion. They just changed chairs, but they didn't change the hat that they were wearing, right? And I think there you can really see that this equality of voices produces better outputs, and they can see that in the game. For me, that was really eye-opening to have such a clear metric attached to performance of equality in the speaking time, the communication.
That's a great example. And maybe there's a good segue from Marie-Philippe. By the way, to all participants, feel free to ask questions in the chat while Heiko and David are sharing their stories. And the question is, do you agree that lean operational excellence is a way to get towards self-organization?
That's a question for the engineer.
Okay, so that's a binary question. So if I could just say no. So one of the tricks that we try is we say, start the question with the word how. So I would say something like, how does lean, or how does implementing lean help move us toward or away from self-organizing teams? Otherwise, I'll just say no. But that's only if I'm in a bad mood. So I think lean is very important. The limitation for me that lean has is that lean focuses on reducing waste. So lean removes waste and errors from a recurring process. The problem is that's great for statistical process control and engineers, but it doesn't inspire humans. No one comes to work and says, oh, today I'm going to suck less than yesterday. People want to achieve something amazing. So lean is only part of the equation. Leaders need to establish a vision of how awesome we can be. Oh yeah, as part of that, we're going to reduce errors. And I can tell you, for my team operating the nuclear propulsion plant, the problem was we would come to work. Everyone was scared. They were scared shitless to make a decision because they didn't want to make a mistake. And that biased the whole team into inertia. Heiko talked about bias for action. You get a bias for action if people want to achieve excellence. And so, but it's a tricky conversation to have with your team because they say, oh, so you're telling us it's okay to make mistakes? I'm like, well, yes.
Don't drop the torpedo.
Yeah, don't drop the torpedo. I mean, some mistakes are game over. and in life, you don't get to put any more quarters in the machine. So I got sidetracked. But anyway, so I love lean and I love the structures of lean, but in terms of inspiring humans, I think it only goes so far.
Yeah, but can I jump in?
Can I add on to that? Sorry, the organizational analogy for that for me would be Six Sigma, right? It's an error reduction philosophy. And that's why when we started this transformation out of the HR department, HR always starts on the back foot, right? Nobody likes HR. Everybody, you might have an HR person who you think they're slightly confident. Now I'll use their help, but I have yet to meet a company where somebody says our HR department is awesome. They got it all figured out. When I need entrepreneurial advice, first stop is HR. So we were part of the error reduction process. We were the first error in the system. And there was no way to inspire my team to achieve something new. So there was a famous line by the VP of customer service from Amazon, who said, you know, the best customer service is no need for customer service. So nobody gets up in the morning and says, you know what I really want? I want to talk to the nice guys from Amazon because my package didn't arrive. There's this one lady, she's always super nice to me. You want your package to arrive, right? That's how we try to get away from this error reduction in HR, to say the best HR is not no HR, it's no need, positive need for HR, because the system is self-organizing. So we try to rise above the error reduction philosophy towards establishing a new normal. Right? Sorry, but you had a question.
If you wanted to add.
Yeah, just to jump on David's point, because when you talk about lean, here is the traditional lean. And now in business transformation, I'm feeling we call it now operational excellence. We always start with the why, and then we review how to engage the people before putting the right, tools that we need for them to support them. So it was I think it's a whole together. It's not just one part of lean is process optimization. There is also purpose and people as well.
Yeah, I think that's really good.
And I think that right now, many ways lead to Rome. I think a lot of these concepts have a lot in common. For us, anyways, what we believe, that is something where David and I had a lot of discussions around, is what didn't really exist on the submarine in a way was this constant need to adjust leadership and budgets, at least not the way I understood it, right? So in the organization, what we tried to really hack and to reestablish a new paradigm for was, how is leadership defined and how is money distributed in the organization? Because money means power, and how many people you lead means power. And power was something that people went for, because more power went with more prestige, bigger cars, and more salary and more bonuses. And getting past these ego aspects and saying, how do we find new ways of actually managing organizations with a new approach to what is leadership, not a person, but a skill set that might be in any of us at any given time? And how do we distribute the money so it's not an instrument of power, but an enabling force? That was really tricky. And that's the fewest companies have really chosen to tackle that problem.
There's a very good question about C-level from Judith. Maybe that's a nice segue as well. So let me just scroll because more questions are coming now. How do you convince a C-level team to go for self-organizing? They very often only see the downside for themselves. Just showing them the uplift from the company's profit doesn't seem to be enough.
Okay, well,
actually,
I say you don't. I say
aside from the profit.
Yeah, I say you don't. We never try to convince people. If they don't fundamentally, you have to believe in human beings. You have to believe that if I let my team make decisions and they have the technical competence, they know the code, they know the laws, they know the nuclear reactor, whatever it happens to be, and they understand what we're trying to do, given that they will try to make the right decisions. That doesn't mean they're always going to be right. But if you don't believe that, I can't convince you of that. And I can't say, sometimes you have a conversation where someone will prove to me that this will make the company more money. I said, I have a lot of stories, and I've seen it happen 100 times, because people who feel better about work will do better and the company will do better. But it's a long-term investment. It's a long-term risky investment. All investments in human beings are long-term investments. But if you don't believe it, I can't convince you.
But I mean, this was basically the starting point for us to go on this shared adventure of creating this VR experience. I would say never, I'm challenging myself here, David, pitch in if you have another pitch. I've never met a convert. I've never seen anybody who went completely from one side to the other. I mean, even you, I mean, you said, you know, you came up through the ranks as a quote unquote good soldier, but there were certain things in your socializing that when you were in the right moment, in the right position, that you changed things around. You know, it wasn't, you saw the light all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
And I'd say the same is true with leaders and C-levels. They either have an inner, they either want to, they have a feeling, yeah, we would like to know how different could look, but I've never seen somebody who just changed their colors completely. The VR experience was therefore to say, if you're unsure, if you don't know what this requires of you, what this would feel like, then try this out, right? Then you might have a higher level of clarity from that experience, but this is not to convert you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep up that while Heiko was talking, and I wasn't listening to you, my friend, but I was just trying to read all these good, these.
I can help with another very good question from James.
Okay, great.
Is one of the problems that companies, people like to cherry pick what they see as the best of framework. Instead of embracing it, they may misuse and hijack the terminology to create an appearance of.
Oh, yeah, all the time. And we've seen bad behavior on both sides. As soon as you do, some people refer to our program as an empowerment program, and people say, oh, that means I can do whatever I want. And like, no, you can't. No one can do whatever, even the CEO can't do whatever she wants right now. So you're never going to be able to do whatever you want. And so we see bad behavior on both sides.
I think again, for me, it comes back to this statement of, it's not the lack of structure, it's how structure is established. I'll give you a tangible example. So one of our very first customers, very pioneering, daring VP of HR of a Swiss company, Swiss hotel, Pierre Botteron. And he implemented one of our tools, which is a feedback tool where colleagues can give feedback to each other across hierarchies and ranks and whatever. So if you appreciate something positive, share feedback with them and they get that in real time. And we can visualize this and see who's sharing a lot of feedback with whom. So they adapted this and they said, once a month, we want to actually point out the person who has shared and received the most positive feedback, right? And we're going to have a big company event and that's going to be pointed out, you know, it was Heiko, it was Jane, whoever it was. And this worked. It was great. And it was very motivational for people to see that their voice mattered. They were appreciating their colleagues' work. And, you know, colleagues amongst each other, they can sniff the bullshit a lot better than the boss can, because a lot of people, they kiss ass outwards, but they kick downwards. So in this case, the actual value contributors were rewarded. So then one week we send them the data and we say, this is your star of the month. And the HR department comes back and says, hey guys, we don't want to send that person up on stage because this person had the most missed days. They were actually, you know, that's not a great role model. They were sick for so many days. Who's the second place person? And we said, that's not how it works. You know, you made a deal with your people. It was clear, they bought into that, and it's a voluntary tool. You can't change the rules in mid-flight. Right? And they said, but this is really counterproductive and we don't want this. And we said, we'd rather pull the tool than subvert it, right? This might sound like a trifle. It might sound like, why are you making such a big thing out of it? But for us, it was, we've established a deal with your employees, and it's important to uphold that deal or to go into a negotiation with them and to change the deal. But you can't just do that in the background because that will demolish trust. Right? So I think that is really important. Once structure is established, play by the rules. Now important, and I think that's where a lot of this processes in organizations come in and become crystallized. You should have an expiration date for these structures and for these processes. At which point do we revisit them? At which point do we need to look at them because they might be out of context? Times have moved on. This is not the deal anymore. Who looks at these processes when to see if they're still up to date? And actually maybe makes changes to them or gets rid of them or whatever.
Thank you. There's a very good question related to crisis, the topic of our session. So what advice do you have for leaders on how to stay on course during the times of crisis rather than fall into old habits and derailers?
Yeah, I could take a whack at that. What you need to recognize now is that there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of things we can't control, and you're probably feeling anxiety and stress and uncertainty. Remember that everybody else is feeling those things too. Now, when we put human beings under stress, we know what happens in our brain is that the ability to say, oh, well, you make a decision, that goes down. And we want to cling tightly to the decisions that we can make. So the tendency under stress is, I'm going to issue a bunch of orders. All this distributed decision making goes away. I'm going to go back to issuing orders. I think, so for me, there's a few things that we do, and I've got a series of videos that's actually on our, if you go to YouTube, Leadership Nudges, I have 6 videos that talk about these 6 things. And the first one is routine, and the second one is ritual, routine and ritual. So the idea is, I can't control a lot out here, but I can control my morning. And so if I used to get up at 6:30, I can still get up at 6:30. If I used to shave and get dressed, I still shave and get dressed. I do, every morning I do a little bit of yoga and meditation. And I'm still doing it today. And that tends to ground me. And it's boring and it's repetitive, but it sends a signal to your body, hey, I got this. I'm in control. I can control the beginning of the day and control the end of the day, including, I think the most important thing for you to control is what time you go to bed. Because if you don't go to bed at the right time, you're not going to get up, you're not going to get enough sleep, you're not going to get up at the right time, and this is going to cascade into this out of control behavior.
I highly recommend you get a 3-week-old baby and try that.
Well, yeah, Heiko, I was thinking about you when I was talking. I said, well, you know, maybe, but you still do whatever little you can, you do. And then rituals. If you celebrate Easter, celebrate Easter. It's not going to look like the same Easter celebration that you did last year. If you have a birthday coming up, my brother-in-law in Italy just had his birthday yesterday. And we had a little celebration. We did it on Zoom. It wasn't quite the same as you normally would, but we try and get as close as possible. And these things send a signal to your body that hey, I got this, you're in control, you remain calm. Calm is contagious. We would always say in practice, you can get excited, you can be all crazy with your team. Hey, what, you know, flooding, blah, blah, blah. But in an actual emergency, you want to remain calm, breathe deeply down into your belly. I can't tell you how many times standing in the control room, and it's like, holy, and then I'd be like, and then I would just try and be calm, because if I freaked out, the team freaked out. If they freaked out, we were sunk.
And I think there's something, I mean, you know, I had the privilege of sharing some time with David when he was helping me on my book, and we were up in the Swiss mountains hiking and sitting in the sun and talking about stuff. And, you know, what I shared with David was that many times in this transformation journey that I was in, I would freak out myself. Like, I would drive home and I would have to pull over on the road. And there was so much pressure on me and so much that was riding on me at that moment. I was bawling, I was crying, right? I couldn't take it anymore. And then you want to go into that mode of, I'll take the helmet. I will issue an order just so I feel better, right? And then many times I did. I went back and I'm like, okay, guys, if this sucked, Courtney, do this, Catherine, and please. I think an important moment in this leadership transformation is to cut yourself some slack and say, that's normal. Your brain is geared towards that. What you do with it is important. Not that it happens, but once it has happened, to go, guys, I'm sorry. Now that I've breathed, I fucked up. I'm sorry. You got this, Courtney. Karen, can you breathe me one more time just so I feel better? And then you take it. But to go back and to apologize to the team whenever you have, you know, gone back into your old habits, but to acknowledge this is normal, this is okay, this can happen, but to move forward. Right?
David, you shared the 2 nudges on rituals, and there was rituals. Sorry.
Yeah, rituals and routines.
And routines, thank you. And there is a question from Bilge. She mentions that you said that in self-organized communication is really important and needs to be 10, 20 times more than normally. And she's asking, what about in a time of crisis? How does communication should work now? And she's adding that extra complexity of being remote. What's your point on that?
Now you can pitch network, David.
Well, Heiko's been working on this problem, and you want to talk about that?
No, go ahead. I was just joking.
Well, here's the way I think about it: is even in well-distributed teams, there's still a sense of communications go up and then down, and I need the communications to go across. So just doing quick one-on-one FaceTime sessions, doing little Zoom calls with the whole group like this. We have different rules for our remote meetings. And the original idea, the original concept was, oh, remote is going to be the sad stepbrother of real. But it turns out you can actually do more things in remote than you can do in real. One of our rules for remote is everyone's got to have their camera on, because turning your camera off is what allows people to like, oh, I won't pay attention, that kind of thing. So one of the rules for me is, and I'm terrible at this. I get bored, I start typing an email. So my rule is I have to show my hands. So I'm showing my hands in the camera, then I can't be typing an email. So right there, hands. Show me your hands. So yeah,
this is when hair comes in handy, David.
Yeah. Well, the group agrees to the rules, but once we make a commitment, because we all know it's like, yeah, that makes sense. Now, if someone says, well, hey, my toddler's coming in, I got to deal with them, or my dog came in, I want to pet it. Fine. Fine. We all understand we're adults or we can make decisions, but it's not a rule, I guess. It's a practice that we're going to have our cameras on. And there was also a thing on meetings, and I think the meetings, I like to watch the way the groups run meetings, and there's a couple things I look for. Number one, what time does the meeting start? Number two, who talks first? Are we waiting for the boss to show up and say, okay, now that we're all assembled, blah, 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 blah. Or is the meeting start, if the meeting starts at noon and the boss, one of the things we tell the CEO to do is don't show up for the meeting. Just show up 5 minutes late. I want to see what happens. And if at noon, somebody else on the team says, all right, meeting's starting, blah, blah, blah. And then at 12:05, the CEO walks in and he or she just goes and sits in the back. That's a well-struck, that is, I think, much closer to a self-organizing team. The team that waits for the CEO to show up, okay, now we can start, blah, 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 that's a down check. And then who talks, and as Heiko talked about the team language group, just count the number of words. Is the word balance even? If someone doesn't say anything at all, the job of the leader is not to convince them of something, but say, oh, because they're probably seeing it different than the rest of us, but they feel uncomfortable challenging the group. So our job is to make it safe for them. Leaders make it safe, not add stress to the team.
I think there's a great question in there. Sorry if I'm taking this away from you. If we could give one recommendation, David, what should be the most important focus right now to work towards a post-corona world for leaders in organizations?
Yes.
It's got to be about connection for me. There's a lot of teams out there and they have practices. I was talking to one of our clients yesterday. I said, oh, I'm seeing some backsliding. We had these good practices. We seem to be backsliding. Yeah, because everybody's freaking out and we're not in the office. And so we're not able to give the feedback that we normally would do. If you fall back to anything, the last thing you want to give up is human connection. And I have this weird idea that we may actually be able to connect better, because now I'm looking at you in your living room, and it's okay for your kids to walk in and out of the camera. It's okay for you to lean over and grab your cat and stick your cat on your lap. It's okay for you to get your cup of coffee or whatever it is. Now I may actually see you as a person in a way that if you came to work and left all that behind, I didn't see you. So I was able to trick myself that there's no human attached to the worker. But now we're all seeing each other as humans. And so if things aren't perfect for the next 2 weeks, that's fine. Your team will never forget how you first, and the second thing, sorry, is truth. They will never forget the way you treated them during the great coronavirus pandemic of 2020. 10 years from now, they'll be saying, my leader was honest with me, we maintained connection, they really cared about me, hey, how are you doing, what can we do for you? Now is not the time to focus on making quota.
But then, like the governments, right? I mean, I think organizations got it in a lot of sense, but it's interesting to see governments like also in Germany or even in Europe. First thing is locking things down, right? Trying to gain control, cutting all the communication off. But then still today, there is not yet a good network of communication between all the doctors and people doing science research, between the leaders across the globe, being all in the same ship or boat, trying to figuring things out, trying to solve it, like you would say today as a very old-fashioned structured company, right? And there, I think the way to go is even further, right?
But I think we were all flat-footed. We're all caught out by this pandemic, right? That's one thing. It's unprecedented in our generation. But I think actually, and I'm not a conservative at all, but what our chancellor in Germany has done is one of the biggest social experiments I can remember, because we don't have a lockdown like in Italy. We don't have a lockdown like in Spain. What she said, guys, this is serious. You have to take it seriously. And please, here are certain rules that we have to stick to so the contagion can we're getting a grip around it, so we flatten the curve. I will not tell you you have to, but I strongly urge you to do the following things, right? She actually put the responsibility on the citizens to say, if you're responsible, we can beat this thing, but you have to stick to the rules. But it's not in a level of Italy or Spain where they're saying, you'll get a fine if you step outside your door and you don't have a dog, right? And I think for me, if you look at organizations, it's the same thing. You can't coerce your population to go to a different model of work. You have to get them at a point where they understand what's in it for me. Why should I do this? Why is this the right thing to do? I think I'm really curious what this will turn out to be. In the past, I always had this example when leaders asked me about self-organizing environments, and they said, yeah, but the majority of our people, they're not quite there. They're not smart enough for this.
Yeah.
So we can't let them, we can't let the inmates run the asylum. And there was this one vote in Switzerland where the Swiss had to vote on vacation days. Do you want more vacation days? Yes or no? One more vacation day or something. And actually the Swiss turned it down, where if you ask an entire population who have the right clarity about a situation, they know it's not the right time to put more mandatory vacation into our calendars, people can act smartly, even as a large group, if they have the right information, if they have the right level of education, and they're given that responsibility, they will step up. And we need to replicate these factors in organizations, and very often we don't, right? That for me, but I hope and I pray that in Germany, we get this thing under control with the measures the chancellor has given out now, because it will validate so much about a people, and it will give so much confidence to a population coming out of this. We made it, not the rules.
With the last 7 minutes till the end of the call, I wanted to change a bit the dynamic, and Sasha, thank you for doing that already. I would just like to invite people to ask questions directly, and I will call out one person because I think there was a good question on the chat. Jane Piper, I think you had a good question about crisis and decision making.
Okay, it wasn't the joke that I put in the chat then that you wanted me to share.
That was earlier than that.
Yeah, so I said to David had said something about that when he's freaking out, and if his team freaking out, then they were sunk. And I was thinking, but aren't you in a submarine? Aren't you already sunk?
Yeah.
So, but that wasn't my.
Hey, every ship can be a submarine once.
Exactly.
The best one I heard from David was, all ships are meant to go underwater. Some just need some support.
And some come back up again, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, my serious question was, in a crisis, there are times when things need to move very quickly, and I was thinking of the analogy when you're under attack. At that time, is it a time where decision making is dispersed, or do you have some sort of structure that people do have to, in those occasions, follow orders in a more authoritarian way?
I can tell you my experience with that. And I'll give you an example. It's not a being under attack, but say combating a fire on board the submarine. And the way it used to be was, if there was a fire, we would say fire, fire, fire. Hose team 1, take the engine room hose and report to this place. So get the thermal imager where you can see through the smoke and go there. It was command and control. People would be told what to do. And the problem was, people's objectives when fighting the fire was not to put the fire out. Their objective was to follow the procedures and do what they were told. And so we had dysfunctional behavior. People actually running past the fire to get the fire hose that was 50 feet away, even though they could have just taken a portable extinguisher right there and put it out. But that wasn't their job, so they went to adhere what their job was, not adhere with what we were all trying to do. It sounds crazy, but I've seen this in every organization, so it's not some weird thing that just happens on nuclear submarines. And so we said, look, we're going to change the whole thing. We will provide information, not instruction. So we changed the way we said things. We said a hose is needed in the engine room. A thermal imager is needed. And then the team, someone would say, I got the hose, I'm closest to the hose, and they would report it on the phone. So-and-so with this hose is moving in this direction. And so there would be this verbal map being continuously created about how the team was responding in what different places. And we had a chart where we would move hoses and things, and we could put out information. But we didn't know, if we said, this hose team grab this hose, there may be a burning thing in between. Back in the control room, we didn't know that was going on, but the teams would organize themselves around it. If we just said a hose is needed, and then someone would act on it. So I'm a firm believer that if this is the key thing, if the team is properly incentivized, maybe that's the word, there's no fire escapes on a submarine. So you got to put it out or you die. There's two endpoints. Fire out, you live. Fire not out, you die. So there's a common incentive, which I don't see in a lot of companies. And the second thing is we train all the time. So people know we train, we put the fire here, we put the fire there, we put the fire here, but this hose doesn't work. Now what's the back? And so when you have those two things in place, then you can release control. If you try to release control without those things in place, then it doesn't work. And people say, oh, look, it didn't work. Empowerment doesn't work. I'm going to go back to being in charge. We had another situation. We had to do something very quickly with the submarine.
David, let me just pitch in. I think this is an important point if you make the translation to organizations, that anarchy is not autonomy, right? And we have a lot of leaders that we talk to who say, oh, but there was this one instance where I gave my team all the freedoms and they dropped the ball, and I'm not doing that again. You know, that's not what self-organization or autonomy is about. I mean, we've dedicated our entire business to creating software we can, what David called the map, right? Where we can map people's intentions and their contributions and say, what you need from us as leaders is clarity about where are we going? What are the priorities? And then you can make it transparent to people. What are you working on, right? So we don't box people in job descriptions, but we say the important thing is what is the contribution, which exactly what David is saying about your contribution is to stop the fire, not to follow the procedure. I don't want you to follow your job description. I want you to add value to the customer. Whatever it is that you need to do for that, you go for it, right? And the important thing with that is the mindset of the leader has to shift to establish that clarity to the people, to give the right priorities to them. And then you once said that, David, death is a powerful motivator. I think that's what we're seeing now in the crisis. A lot of the small to medium-sized businesses, we're now actually in a situation where our revenue is drying up, right? We're competing with a smaller and smaller pond with the thing that we're doing. So suddenly death becomes an actual thing, right? It's actually, there is no more hatch, right? This is the ship. And I, for one, I want to give a shout out to my team. You know, not that we're in immediately financial dire straits, but they came back to us and they said, in order to make the contribution that we want to make with this organization, we want to voluntarily cut our salaries because we want to stretch our financial means. And that's the difference, I think, that also David witnessed on the submarine, that people will come to you with ideas. They will come to you with proposals and say, outside of what we've already done, here's the other thing, or yeah, I challenge you on this, because it is safe for them and they know it is expected of them to challenge the status quo. But it doesn't mean they just do willy-nilly whatever they want. That's the difference for me between doing your job and making a contribution.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna stick to our promise of finishing at the hour. And I think the last question to both of you, David and Heiko, would be, coming back to the topic of our session, is self-organization more resilient in a time of crisis? What would be your last two inputs on that?
Ladies first. David, you go.
Age before beauty. Yeah, I started talking about Fukushima, and when you look at what happened there, the team was following procedures. Even though they knew they needed to vent the reactor, they didn't do it. Self-organization, though, it's a muscle. If you haven't developed the muscle during the good times, you're not going to have the muscle tissue there during the crisis when you need it. So you got to work on it all the time.
And then you will actually have it when you need it. I mean, that was, for me, was that the learning from the video games industry, that when all the people are out of the house and a really important guy comes who's giving money to your organization, and only one intern is there to explain to this person where the project stands and what the problems are and what the next steps on the roadmap are, that's not the moment when you say, oh, now I want to start self-organization. That's when you better have this intern as an equal member of the team who can pick up this super senior person and say, I can tell you anything that any senior person in this place could have told you because I'm an equal part of this team and I'm involved in all the decisions. There's no layered access to information or anything. And that for me is, once you see it in action in the most acute crisis, you'll never go back because you've seen the power of it.
Thank you so much for the final thoughts. And I'm seeing some last comments from our participants. I think Sabine asked whether we could continue that conversation and have a second round. So I'm inviting you to join something that we created to continue discussions like this. We have a Slack community available, so you can scan the code to join us. And I really wanted to say big thanks to both David and Heiko for their insights, for their stories. It's been great. And thank you to all of you who joined us and asked all the questions, and hope we can continue with
and
you.
Maybe Ola, one thing, since we do have an actual session coming up in, when is it?
It's 19th of October.
19th of October. So
Yeah.
you will get a chance to actually try out the VR experience that David and our team has created. So make sure you sign up for that and you're there. And if you need any help with the self-organizing teams, then we're currently providing the technology that we're creating to align teams and to visualize them for free until the end of June to really help organizations get through this crisis. So reach out and I'll gladly explain to you what it does. And otherwise, I hope to see you in October.
Thank you, Heiko. And David, also, we will share your nudges, leadership nudges with the participants. We had some really great comments on this being really insightful. So thank you
Watch them
to everyone.
and read this book. This just came out from David. Read this. It's a great book. You will not waste your money and your time. I've read it twice already. It is awesome. And if you don't have an immediate conversation with David, this is the best way to follow up on this.
I can see James picking up the, the book as well. Fantastic. Thank you so much to everybody, and stay healthy, and yes, reach out to us if you need any help.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your time, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.